So if you were given the chance to finally play one of your favorite games, but in a completely new way, would you take it? And is it really wrong to make a game that a franchise is just unable to deliver on? This is the story of a Pokemon game you always wanted, but never got. This is the story of Palworld.
A captured human? Did I just invent slavery? Holy
Oh my god, what happened? Now we're getting a shiny already. Yeah. Alright, capture. 82%. Holy
Something that a lot of people forget is the fact that a game is not just the creation of its maker. After all, it is the players who bring life to the game by playing it and interacting with its world. But if you put hours and hours of your life into something, it's normal to get attached to it and its progress. For a lot of big companies, games might just be a dollar sign, but for many players, their experience with games has formed some of the highlights of their entire life.
His teammate, bro. Stop challenging, man.
I didn't.
Not you! Them!
Though this leads to a lot of situations where things that are best for the company may not be best for the players. And when it comes to Nintendo, their strategy is mostly improving upon what they've already done. And while that has given us some awesome games over the years, a lot of people wanted something a bit more, something different. First, let's talk about what even Palworld is and how did it get so famous. If you've been online at all in the past 2 weeks, then there's no chance that you haven't heard about Palworld. It has truly taken the internet by storm, considering the fact that it has risen to the top of multiple leaderboards in such a short span of time. Since its release on the 19th of January, it has sold almost 10 million copies and effortlessly broke multiple records. It became the second game after PUBG to reach a peak of 2 million players. And it has 1 million players playing the game at any point of time, which makes it the most played game currently. To give you an idea of how big that is, it has surpassed games like Baldur's Gate 3, Counter-Strike 2, and Apex Legends in just a couple of weeks since launch. Palworld is the very definition of a video game being hugely successful. But that raises the question about how this even came to be. I mean, it wasn't like millions of people were waiting for its release with bated breath. Compared to its player count today, very few people were actually following the development process of this game. The thing that worked in favor of Palworld is how easy it is to stream. In the game, you can really do anything. Dubbed frequently as the Pokemon with guns, you can go as far as to eat your pals for food. This kind of freedom makes it the perfect game for streamers who are trying to entertain their audience. It may have started slowly with only a couple of streamers playing it at first, but its popularity only exploded from there. YouTubers praised the freedom it gave you, and like most games today, content creators' opinions on games can influence thousands of sales and shape a game's entire community into what it is. Though it does make sense that people would want to buy a game that gives them so much freedom. Going back to the case of Baldur's Gate 3, we saw it rise exponentially in popularity during 2023, and it even ended up winning Game of the Year. It wasn't like people were really craving for Baldur's Gate 3 to be released, or that there was some huge untapped demand for role-playing games, but ultimately, it was a game that allowed you to do anything that you wanted to do. Every problem had multiple creative solutions, and it could be tackled in a variety of different ways, which made the player feel very much in control. And that really is the biggest strength of Palworld. Players are located on an island which has many different types of creatures known as pals. Players have to directly engage in combat with pals in order to weaken them and then capture them using pal spheres, which are this game's alternatives to Pokeballs. One player summed up the experience perfectly, saying that the moment he booted up the game, he punched a person. Then that person pulled out a gun and instantly killed him. That spiraled into even more chaos. It's these kind of random interactions that make Palworld really special, giving every player their own stories and setting itself apart from other games in the market currently. Another thing that Palworld has done really well is perfectly fill the void that has been left behind by many Pokemon games. The last Pokemon game that was released was Pokemon Scarlet and Violet in 2022, making it over a year and a half since its release. And a lot of people have often criticized Pokemon for not being innovative and just sticking with the same boring formula. For years, Pokemon fans were demanding a good game, something which gives them a different aspect of the Pokemon world. But Nintendo hasn't really succeeded in bringing that experience to fans, and a lot of people have been disappointed with the recent Pokemon games. Moreover, there just isn't the same hype associated with Pokemon games anymore. Some of the recent games like Pokemon Legends Arceus, which were enjoyable, did not have a lot of impact on the gaming community. Palworld can be a direct alternative to Pokemon. A lot of players feel like they already know the game since the Pals are so similar to Pokemon's. They have the same fighting styles, animations, and overall general looks. There are also a lot of realistic touches added, like how stronger pals can easily hunt weaker pals, much like how it would be in real life. Palworld truly feels like a Pokemon game that should have been made a long time ago. People love this game and the numbers show it perfectly. While Pokemon Scarlet and Violet hasn't really done that well, reaching around $23 million in sales, they haven't really had much of an impact as Palworld has. And one thing that really contributes to that is how good Palworld is to play with friends. It's possible that just like Lethal Company, Palworld's best attribute is how it's an absolute joy to play with friends. We recently did a video on the amazing rise of Lethal Company and how it won the Better with Friends category on the Steam Awards. And akin to that game, the freedom you receive in the game to do crazy things means that any time spent with friends will be extremely memorable. All in all, Palworld has many things going on for it that make it an extremely engaging game to play. But that's not where the story ends. After all, the Pokemon connection runs deep. And maybe we're closer than we think to Palworld becoming the battleground for a heated legal battle. Which brings me to the next segment. Is it a Pokemon ripoff? Let me start this off with a small story. After all, this is not the first time that Pokemon has outraged about someone copying their idea. Digital Monsters, or Digimon as it's better known, was launched all the way back in 1997. As the name suggests, it had these creatures by the name of Digimon, which could be hatched from virtual eggs and were raised by human tamers. These Digimon even had multiple forms, each one stronger than the last. Obviously, it is easy to see why it would compare to Pokemon. However, as time went on, people stopped caring about its similarities to the franchise, and a lot of people even enjoyed the gameplay of Digimon, and it has its own developed fan base. I think we have a similar story with Palworld right now. There are some people upset and feel like the game is a cheap copy of Pokemon, but there's also a lot of people who absolutely adore the game and would play it for a long time to come. Personally, if Nintendo doesn't sue Palworld into the ground, it seems like Palworld will continue to exist for a long time. But that's only if Palworld isn't sued by Nintendo. Nintendo has just released a statement regarding Palworld, as a lot of people were asking Nintendo whether they would take action or not. Here's what they said. We have received many inquiries regarding another company's game released in January 2024. We have not granted any permission for the use of Pokemon intellectual property or assets in that game. We intend to investigate and take appropriate measures to address any acts that infringe on intellectual property rights related to the Pokemon. However, most fans ended up ridiculing Nintendo for how surface level this statement seems. Moreover, Pocket Pair, the people who are behind Palworld, are not worried about being sued anytime soon. There is no evidence of stolen assets, no evidence of AI generated content, and really no evidence of anything that can be turned against them. And unless Nintendo can prove that the Pals are ripped off Pokemon, there's really nothing they can do. After all, they can't really sue Pocket Pair for having the idea of these Pokemon-like creatures. That'd be like Call of Duty suing PUBG for making a battle royale. But a lot of people have pointed out just how similar the Pals look to Pokemon. One user on Twitter even went as far as to say that creating a complex model mesh with such near exact proportions is practically impossible. And that may come up later if there are any legal proceedings. There is no doubt that the executives at Nintendo are trying to find anything they can against Palworld. But Takuro Mizobi, the CEO of Pocket Pair, has said that they have analyzed everything and are pretty confident they won't get into any legal trouble. Fans, on the other hand, are divided between two groups, with many of them taking to Twitter to voice their concerns. One user said, "If I see one more tweet about how Palworld is a triumph of game design and shames other games, I'm gonna lose it. Literally set aside all controversy and the game is still a soulless slop created slowly to copy trends and move copies." And he isn't the only person who has this opinion. A lot of people feel like it's unfair for Nintendo that another game company can just copy their designs and get away scot-free. On the other hand, some people have opted to take a more neutral stance, like user Real Radical Soda, who said, "I've been enjoying Palworld, but the artist in me cringes whenever a blatant Pokemon ripoff PAL appears. It's not too hard to just edit existing PALs to make them more unique." Others even tried to defend Palworld, like how a Reddit user says, "A common criticism of Palworld is that it copies Pokemon. This criticism is primarily directed at the monster designs, and I won't argue that Palworld's monsters look heavily inspired by Pokemon's designs, but I will maintain that Palworld merely using designs reminiscent of Pokemon does not make the entire game derivative of it." Ultimately, as it stands right now, Palworld is unlikely to be sued by Nintendo. From the looks of the current situation, there's really not much that Nintendo can argue for, considering that Palworld has taken so much inspiration from other games like Ark and Breath of the Wild. And while some people are upset and raise allegations against Palworld, a majority of people just enjoy the game and want to play it more. And this leaves a lot of people wondering what comes next for Palworld. For Pocket Pair, 10 million copies seems to just be the start. They have made a comprehensive plan where they want to add things like PvP, raid bosses, and maybe even new islands later in the future updates. And while the current gameplay is amazing, there are a lot of bugs and minor issues that need to be fixed to make the game experience a lot smoother. It also faced some server issues when too many people tried to play the game, though they seem to mostly be resolved for now. There are also plans for Palworld to get crossplay between Steam and Xbox, but overall it definitely seems like we're gearing in to see Palworld only increase in strength and player count. Palworld may have ended up opening a Pandora's box of sorts. Now that we have seen our favorite Pokemon forced into slavery and gunned down infinite times, maybe Nintendo will finally learn from this and start to focus on making new and innovative games that really differ from generation to generation. Overall, it seems like the rise of Palworld may not remain constrained to just player counts and profits, but rather be the start of a change that sweeps over the gaming landscape, and a change we can return back to the good old days of gaming where games were truly fun. And on that note, I'd like to end this video. If you like this type of content, then don't forget to like and subscribe, as it truly helps me out a lot. Thanks for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.